Hello again. This is Nick Roach, and again we're outside. Bit of a wet, dreary late afternoon, but it seems quite quiet today. Haven't heard many geese squawking. We'll see how it goes. A bit windy though. Hopefully again the microphone's okay. I'd like to say a few words in response to a question I've been asked recently. Nick, how come you agree with everybody else? I was originally asked it a few weeks ago on the Facebook page, where someone asked me a question and I answered it, and it was about another person's teachings. I think it was regarding the non-duality, the Neo-Advaita, who insists there's no one here. And I was saying that I understand that, I get that. I just teach more than that. But I don't disagree to a certain extent. I just don't stop there. And this person was saying, well, you can't agree with it. You either agree with it or you disagree. You can't say you agree with it and then say more about it and explaining it more, because there's nothing else to explain. You can't agree with something unless you agree with it 100%. And I did agree with it 100%. But it doesn't mean there isn't more to explain if you see more. And then a friend messaged me yesterday or the other day with a question about something, and then they listed a few names to me of established spiritual teachers known to us both, who amongst themselves seem to disagree on quite a lot of things, and yet when he posed the questions to me, I was agreeing with all of them. And again he said, Nick, how can you agree with everybody else when they are disagreeing amongst themselves? I found that quite funny, because that's what I do. And I had a look at this. Why or how am I able to agree with people who themselves can't agree with each other? When to me what they're saying makes perfect sense, each one of them. And there are several reasons for this. One is of course the words that people use. To me it's about being, the I, the stillness, the awareness, as all-encompassing state of stillness or awareness or being. And I can keep throwing in different words like that. I don't care what it's called, by myself or someone else. The point is this. So when I hear other people use different words to describe it, I have no problem with that. If they want to call it nothing, I don't mind that. As long as everything else seems to fit and they're in that state, why would I object to what they call it? And if they're not in the state, why should I object? Because they can't be any more aware or enlightened or still or being than they already are. Someone can only teach or talk from their own level of experience, which is always deepening regardless of how aware someone is, how enlightened. While they're in a body, I've said before, they're still separate. Therefore that essence of separateness is still being dissolved, still being lived. So it's always going deeper. So I have no objection to the word someone uses. I look to see whether the words they're using could possibly in any way fit with what I'm experiencing. And if it could, well great. We're in the same place. But as I said, the other side of it is that one can answer these questions from different perspectives, from different levels, if we want to use the term levels, but from different perspectives. And in a previous video there were two big ones I spoke about: the statement "I am nothing" and the statement "I am everything." And those two people often argue about, but eventually, it happened here, and I explained that in again an earlier video, those two come together where the dream and the dreamer, the awareness and the happening merge into one experience. And therefore the "I am everything" or "I am nothing," both those statements are redundant, irrelevant, because there is just I. And this is I. I'm saying I rather than "I am," because the amness, I would say, and it happened here, disappears as well, leaving only I, stillness, being. So that itself is beyond words, which is perhaps why I don't get hung up on what words people use. Excuse me. And why I won't argue the point either. If someone wants to use different words, some people are quite insistent they want to argue with me because I'm not using the same words as them. And again, I've covered that in an earlier recording. Don't concentrate on the finger, or you'll miss all the heavenly glory. The words are not the point, but also people are at different levels of expression in themselves, different levels of realization, different states of being. I am deeper now than I was 6 months ago. And 6 months ago I was far deeper than I was 6 months before that. And I wrote 2 of my books 10, 12 years ago. I'm far deeper than I was then. It's always going deeper, you see. So arguing with people as to the words they're using suddenly becomes also redundant, because why argue over words anyway? The fact is the fact. It's only a fact to one's own level or being or experience or state here now, and that's always changing for oneself and for everybody else. Everything is one, but here we're all separate. So if you're the most enlightened person on the planet, let's say, and you're speaking to someone else who's just got their foot through the door of enlightenment and they're at a certain level, and this person is saying it's like this, you as the most enlightened person on the planet, why would you attack them and put them down and say no, you're doing it wrong? Why would you need to? There's no need. And if you're not the most enlightened person on the planet and someone else starts describing it differently and they've been in a state longer than you, again, why argue with them? Because they're either using different words of the same thing, a bit windy, I hope that's not being picked up too much on the microphone, they're either using different words to explain and describe the same thing, or they've had different experiences beyond, or just different from the ones that you have had. So again, why argue with them? You see, everybody's on their own path, their own journey, and all of them lead to the one I, being, stillness. So what's there to argue about? It's great if we can share experiences and share stories as to how this came about in each one of us, because I find those fascinating. But that's not arguing, and that's not telling others they're doing it wrong, they're explaining it wrong, because it's this, this and this. Because ultimately there is no right or wrong. You're either in this state, or the being there is working towards being in this state. Or you've been in this state for a while, and you're coming through it out the other side where there is no separation. And that's when the dream ends for you. Everybody's on this spectrum somewhere. And I guess this mix or jumble of reasons is why when I read what other teachers say, in my mind I'm looking and I'm thinking, asking to myself, do I relate to this? Can I understand what they're saying? Does what they're saying make sense to me? And invariably the answer is, yeah, this makes sense. It's not the way I'd explain it. It's not the words I would use. I haven't even used the path which I got here. They, for example, often don't talk about dissolving emotion at all. They ignore emotion. Not an issue for them. But then if it's not been an issue for them, then why would they talk about it? And why would I object to them not talking about it? And likewise, why should they object to me talking about it? So I do tend to look to see if I can relate to what other people say, and this is the standpoint I come from all the time. I look to understand. When someone says something, my automatic reaction is not to disagree and to argue or correct. Those things don't happen here. My automatic standpoint is, do I understand? Can I relate to that? Is there anything that they've said? Does any of it make sense to me? The way they're describing it, using those words, is there any way the words they've used in my understanding of those words, can any of that they've said relate to my experience in some way? And the answer is almost yes. Almost always yes. Even if they are arguing with everybody else, who I also agree with, because I can understand what they're saying about that particular aspect, and what they're saying about that aspect, and they're saying about that aspect, and they're all using different words, coming at the same thing from different perspectives, disagreeing, and I'm going, yeah, I can see for each one of you. I don't need to argue about it. That does, I will have to admit, make the conversation a little bit one-sided, and often quite short. They say something, and I will reply something along the lines of, I agree, that happened to me, and I might get a smiling face back, thumbs up if it's on Messenger or something, or yes, and that's the end of the conversation. Because unless one is disagreeing with someone else, if you're both on the same wavelength talking about the same thing, there's little to discuss anyway. So it makes conversations with people in the state quite short. There's not much to talk about. And that's fine too. But there's not the arguments, there's not the disagreements. And why should there be? This is only being. It's not rocket science, nothing to work out, nothing to believe in. Doesn't matter what words you use to call it. Make your own language up for all I care. Actually, some people do, to a certain extent, make up their own words. And that's fine too. The point is, am I, the one there, aware of being aware at this moment? If you are, then you're doing it. Then there's nothing to talk about or discuss, really, let alone argue about. It's just being. Thank you.